OIC, otherwise known as the Omnipresent Information Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Peterson.
And I'm the co-host, Noah Hansen. The Omnipresent Information Connection podcast is all about your world and your unique walk on this path called life. We present fascinating, life-changing information from around the world that has been validated. We also authenticate the information by providing you with links to where you can find out more about what we are talking about on our show. This podcast includes historically accurate, genuine facts that have helped shape our daily lives into what they are today. Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Omnipresent Information Connection. We are on the second episode of the Principles series. We're going to make this a 3-part series for you because principles are so important in our lives. If we don't have the right principles, we don't have the right foundation. If we don't have the right foundation, then we can't build. We can't build our lives in the direction that they are meant to go in, the direction that God intends for our lives to go in. And that is a direction of not only prosperity, not only happiness, joy, fulfillment, all these wonderful things, but it's also the direction that truly we can see for ourselves the results manifesting from our actions.
Very exciting.
That's right. Principles. Principles are very important. And so talking about them on this podcast may not be the flashiest, it may not be the most drawing, interesting, mysterious subject we can possibly talk about. However, there is a lot of wonderful things that we can say and give to you as far as value in this podcast. So Principles Part 2, we're talking about different cultures and what principles they had, what principles they utilized.
Hey, we're not talking about high school principles, right?
We're not talking about the vice principals either.
All right.
So the reason that principles are so very important, not only in our individual lives, but in our individual different cultures around the world, is because principles have to do with our morals. Principles have to do with our worldview, the way in which we move in the world, and it can be a both good and bad thing depending on what those principles are, right? And we went over basically what this is in the last podcast. If you haven't listened to that yet, the Principles Podcast is episode 41 on the OIC channel. And so when we are talking about principles, we're talking about morals, we're talking about worldview, and we're talking about the way in which we move in the world. Our founding thoughts, our founding
Belief systems.
Yes, our founding belief systems. Thank you. So as you can see, if you haven't picked it up by now you should understand that principles are one of the most important topics we could possibly be talking to you about on this podcast. And why are we qualified to be able to talk about principles?
Well, the reason why we're qualified, because not only do we know the ancestral part of where we came from.
That's right, yep.
But we also have a historical accurate record to the events of what had happened and our past life, as far as how the Native Americans lived, how the British lived, how the Irish lived, how all these different people, places, Aztecs, Incas, Mayans, all that kind of stuff, how they all lived, right?
That's right.
And so we've got that as far as authenticated truth.
Yeah, we've got the education.
And then on top of that, we have melded, molded, and then have literally created within our own family unit bits and pieces and parts of all of that structure in a principle that becomes the foundation of our family's stepping stone or pathway to who we are today.
So principles will either make you into what you are not or help you be the best version of yourself.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm picking up here. So we're qualified to be able to talk about this because we believe the principles that we have in place in our lives are leading us to a better place, are leading us upwards on a consistent basis. And that's the goal, is to always be moving upwards, always be learning, always be growing. And Kevin and I aren't perfect. We openly admit that. We're not perfect people. No one's a perfect person.
Right.
Besides one person. And that's someone who we talked about quite a lot in this podcast, Jesus Christ. So if we look to the right people, the right founding principles that these people had in place, for our lives and apply them to our lives, then that can really quickly bring us results in life.
Correct. So let's take a gentle walk into these different cultures of people, societies of people, and to be able to find commonplace amongst all of them to be able to find a home within us, right?
All right.
So to be able to start things off, let's talk about the Native American people.
Well, Kevin, as you know, Native Americans based their principles off of a very close relationship with the earth, a very close relationship with spirit. So when you're talking about Native American principles, it can get very deep very quickly.
And why?
Well, if you have a deep relationship with spirit and a worldview that is very spiritual, then there's nothing that happens for no reason. There's nothing that comes into your life that wasn't either allowed by you, put there by an outside entity, or meant to be in the first place.
Absolutely.
And I believe many Native Americans thought this way. Now, that's not to say that some Native Americans had different principles, but when we're talking about a cultural set of principles, then this is encompassing all of Native American culture.
So you got the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans, are Native Americans, and then you have other outlying Indians from there, right?
Yep, like in Hawaii. Yep.
Right? But what did they all have in common principle-wise?
They all had in common an affinity and a relationship with nature and a respect towards nature.
What was the second principle that they all had in common?
Another principle that I see in Native American culture is they all had a very deep, heartfelt respect for their elders and the stories that they could tell.
So family.
Yes, and storytelling.
Right.
That was another major principle of Native America.
So the first one is?
An affinity, a close relationship with nature.
Second one
The
is?
second one is a respect for storytelling, family, and elders.
Then the third, the most powerful.
Well, they had a relationship with what they called the Great Spirit or the Great Mystery, the creator of the universe.
Right. And why did they go through such great depths to be able to speak to the creator?
Well, the relationship with the Great Spirit, the Great Mystery, as many of them called it, was brought over by shamanistic culture, shamanistic teachings.
Well, that was later on in life.
Right.
I'm talking about the very first stage of Native Americans prior to the adoption, the implementation, and then what we know today.
Well, they lived in an ancestral way. They always were talking to their ancestors. And so believing in this creator is like believing in your ancestors. It's something where they believed there was an afterlife and they believed that their ancestors were on the other side, guiding them and teaching them all along the way. At the same time, they knew that there was a creator God, a great spirit that was also on the other side.
Correct. They took better care of their dead than the living. The reason why I say that is because everyone had historical knowledge that there was something beyond the living. And in order to be able to get to having that afterlife effect, is that they had to do enough things during the living state of their life in order to be able to have the aftermath effect in a positive way with their ancestors.
Sure.
But when it came to problems, when it came to issues, when it came to situations that were higher than their own understanding, they called upon their ancestors for that guidance, for that knowledge, for that information. And because of that, and them actually being able to bring forth these people, it became very scary. It became very taboo. It became a very uncomfortable situation when they can be able to be so close to the earthly father that they can be able to summon their ancestors for guidance, support, help, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
Another thing that they referenced always is having their ancestors going into different animals,
Right.
right? Why was that important?
Well, the medicine wheel was almost like the Native American zodiac, where they could predict certain characteristics and certain qualities of a person being born at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
So these animal characteristics, these different symbolic aspects of all these different animals were really a great school system for these people, a great way that they could teach their children different things, how to not only how to survive in the wilderness, but also how to conduct themselves when facing other animals, when facing other qualities of these animals and other people.
Did they have to be able to learn like those animals? Did they have to be able to apply the teachings of those animals?
Right. They would watch them and watch them closely and then apply what they were doing.
Right. So, in closing of this particular Native American subject, is that they saw from youth their elders being able to do what they were doing, seeing how they were talking to then their elders, and then having an elder conversation past the living point of their understanding to be able to bring forth the protection, the love, the guidance, and the wherewithal for them to be able to sustain the life that they were having in that time.
Right. Yep.
So now we go from the Native American, the Aztec, the Incas, the Mayans, to what is another great example of a principal class of people.
Well, the next culture of people I want to bring up is what's called Stoicism. And Stoicism is a school of Hellenistic philosophy that was founded by a man named Zeno of Citium. And it was founded in Athens in the early 3rd century BC. This philosophy of personal ethics was built by its system of logic and its views on the natural world. Like we were saying, these are principles.
Mm-hmm.
So, according to its teachings, Stoicism, as social beings, the path to happiness is found in accepting the moment as it presents itself and not allowing yourself to be controlled by worldly flesh desires or by the fear of pain. So this is the basic overview of what a Stoic person is, of what Stoicism is. And we're going to be pointing out 7 different principles of Stoicism that will allow you to connect with a greater sense of inner peace, because that is what these groups of people are all about, is finding inner peace, happiness, and blessedness.
Mm-hmm.
So, you ready to go ahead with those 7?
Yes, and first and foremost is embrace whatever happens. It's not the events, but our own experiences that cause our fear. So
very good.
If we can be able to establish fear, we can establish happiness at the same exact moment that it's thought.
Yes, and one of them overcomes the other. I would say happiness. I would say peace of mind is much greater than fear because you can do much greater things with it.
But if you know how to empower fear, fear becomes following every available resource back to the solution of the happiness that is you.
And what you just heard is a acronym that Kevin and I have applied to the OIC podcast. So every time that we talk about fear, we talk about following every available resource, because when you follow every available resource back to the truth, then that no longer allows fear to have a place in your mind, in your life.
Oh, I see.
All right, so number one, it's not the events that disturb us, it's our minds. Everything starts in the mind, and how we react mentally determines what our perception continues to be. Whether worse, better, or the same as before, or the same as before when we experience something outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about keeping your focus, having a direction of where you're allowing your mind to go, rather than letting fear take it.
Because in order to be able to know how to apply the principle is to first to be able to literally fine-tune the energy to be able to manifest to get to that principle. So if you are not in a good mood, if you are not in the right frame of mind, you are not going to get to the principal root of what you're trying to overcome. Right?
Right, you have to have the intention first.
Correct. So by applying the intention to the principle allows the principle to be put into play.
And you'll remember this principle, what you are intending to do when these fearful thoughts arise, so that you can then deal with it in a more collected way.
Mm-hmm. What's the next one?
All right, number two. Number two is most things have happened before. This is a principle. Most things have happened before. Having that sort of thought process, having that worldview, makes it a whole new perception. So nearly everything that could disturb us has already happened at some point in recorded history. As long as we learn from the past, we can be living a life not held down by the burden of distress and hopelessness.
So how does that work when it comes to deja vu?
Well, deja vu sort of is a bridge between what's happening now and what has happened before. At least that's what it feels like. Now, deja vu is very, very deep, so I don't know what you want to tell the listeners about deja vu, but that's what I got to say.
The bottom line is that deja vu, for most people, is an ancestral awakening within your own spirit to recognize that you are not alone in the environment that you are in at that moment.
Whew, that's deep.
And so to be able to then bring more value to that is that you then, with an open mind, start to be able to sense through your senses all the different things that may have happened or had happened to an ancestor at that time. So the smell of a rose, the smell of coffee, all of these different senses come alive, and you think that you're experiencing deja vu, something that you may have done, but in essence, for most, is what your ancestors have already been through to bring you that intimate experience back to you.
Yeah, and so deja vu, when it's happening, it almost makes you go outside of yourself and see it from a third party perspective. It's very interesting feeling. And what you're saying is it's some sort of spiritual imprint, an ancestral imprint, most often when this is happening.
Mm-hmm. And that's why most people go grounding, whether in a forest, whether in a park, and it's always usually by themselves and alone. And it's literally getting back to the root of who they are as a person. And that's why grounding is so important, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
That's right.
So Noah, what's the next point?
Number 3, principle of Stoicism, is our thoughts are unreliable. Have you ever heard that, listeners, that your mind can play tricks on you? This is something that I'm sure you have heard before. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. How many times have you been hung up on something that just happened, but it's an hour after this event has occurred and you're still thinking about it? This is what we're talking about. And this is a principle of Stoicism. They knew that their thinking could put them into a position where they are a greater slave than if they were in a prison cell. And they knew that they had to keep their minds in check to make sure that their imagination didn't run amok. Yes.
Yeah.
Didn't run them off the trail
Mm-hmm.
and cause them to go astray.
Let me ask you a question, Noah. Have you ever thanked the moment for occurring?
Are you talking about when a bad thing is happening?
Bad or
unquote?
good?
Yes, I mean, yes. Thanked the moment. I've thanked God for the moment as well.
Right.
Yes, both.
But in a bad moment, when something really bad has happened,
Mm-hmm.
do you immediately go into thankful mode, or do you go into, oh, woe is me mode?
Well, it's quite a learning curve to get out of the woe is me, because I've experienced both. I'm sure you have too.
Right.
And so when you switch from the woe is me to being able to thank the moment, you start to be able to see how you can learn from it rather than how you can avoid it or run away from it.
The moment that you thank that moment, good or bad, you take ownership of it.
That's right.
It no longer takes ownership of you, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, right?
Yes.
And so when you thank that moment, then that moment has but no choice but to bend to your will due to your thankfulness. It's what you then do emotionally, physically, and spiritually after being thankful that then creates the environment for the outcome to either be a positive outcome or a negative outcome. People make things very difficult because we are force trained and conditioned to be the hardest that we possibly can be on ourselves so that we don't have to receive it from another person.
I hear that.
It's subliminal training that has gone on that needs to be abolished.
Right. You need to retrain yourself subliminally.
The quickest way to total and complete freedom and happiness is to be able to thank, if you have no God, to be able to thank the universe then for that moment to occur. And what you will find out is that when you do, you then have that authentic ownership. You can then proclaim and take back that moment. You then can be able to look at things differently because it almost becomes third party in view, right?
Right.
So, listeners, for those that don't have a God that you proclaim, understand is that you in that very moment become the I am in that moment. Because I am happy, I am glad, I am satisfied, I am mad, right?
And you say it enough, eventually you're going to believe it.
If you say it enough, then the I am will become within you a natural entity.
Mm-hmm.
And you will no longer need to fight it, but be delighted within it to then be able to call him your God.
That's right. Listeners, are you familiar with the I am affirmations and how powerful they've been in your life? We'd love to hear about it. Meet us in the comments and share some of that value with the rest of our listeners. We can really help each other grow by sharing our own experiences. So that's what we have open for you at inanewway.com. Now, number 4. Number 4 Stoic principle is adversity can make us stronger. Do not focus on how bad things are in the moment, but on how to get through them. This is what we were just talking about, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What we can learn. When we do this, we can learn to maintain inner peace instead of spending energy on resisting the moment. When we see bad times as a time for strengthening ourselves, then we can welcome these experiences with open arms when they come to us and suffer less for it. So adversity can make us stronger. Don't see challenges as something you need to avoid. Be thankful for them.
Challenges only exist in your worshiping mindset.
That's right. That's right. All right, number 5. I'm loving these. The present is all we have. This is one of the main teachings of Stoicism, is to be present. Be aware of what's going on in the present moment. So, a little example here. Animals experience fear when they are in danger. However, when the danger is gone, they often are back to normal. So, humans, on the other hand, can live in our fear of the past or fear of the future. and we suffer more than we should for these reasons. Fight or flight was only designed for dangerous experiences. If we are being attacked, we need fight or flight to be able to react to that attack. But fight or flight is not designed for dwelling in a prison of our own imagination. So fight or flight can be both mentally, physically, and spiritually harmful. If we are caught in a fight or flight mode for too long, it actually breaks down our immune system. Our immune systems don't work as well. And I've got a few videos on A New Way with Noah where I talk about this actually, because it is such a powerful truth and it is proven scientifically.
Yeah, and your videos are great, by the way.
Why, thank you.
Because I really can resonate with them, for one. Two, they're very simple to be able to understand. And then third, it's a really great gift to yourself to be able to apply it, because on how you break down the simple techniques that allow you to naturally resonate with it, to adopt it and then become it. And so I really encourage all your listeners to be able to go to inanewway.com and to be able to go to A New Way with Noah and look at his videos. Now, getting back to the very start, was the present is all we have.
Yes.
Noah, let me ask you a question.
Go right ahead.
Have you ever received a present or a gift?
Why, yes, I have. Thank you for asking.
Has it always been ungift wrapped?
No. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Most of the time, when you're giving a gift, there's three elements to a gift. Either the wrapping paper or the fancy bag.
Right.
The item within the gift, if it's done properly, would then have paper in it to be able to hide the gift. Right?
Yep.
And then you've got the gift itself in its box or it's in its container, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there's three elements to a gift. And there's three elements of being present. Here's the most powerful part about what you just talked about in this podcast.
Let's hear it.
That in order to be able to recognize and see a gift of presence, to be present, right?
Yes.
Is to be able to first to be able to tear away or to be able to open up an opportunity, a window within yourself to be able to see clearly that there is something beyond your own vision, past your own mindset, that there's something better or different out there that could be able to enable you.
This is reminding me of the A New Way of Living series that we did way back a few years ago, the first podcast.
And thank you for remembering that. The second part is either the paper or the actual box itself, right?
Yep.
Third thing is then becomes the gift, what's inside.
Right.
Right? You will always, most always have to be able to go through three elements in order to be fully present, and not only in everyday situation, but then in a natural way, authenticated way, become the gift to someone else. First, you have to be able to look past your own understanding, past your own knowledge of something.
Yep.
Have to explore a new way of being able to see it, look at it, touch it, feel it.
Have a more open perspective.
Mm-hmm. Then secondly, once you see that there's something inside, which is called value, you can then be able to then remove or to be able to eliminate what was hiding the gift, which could have been for most people insecurities, inabilities, all these negativities,
yes.
right?
Yep.
And then the third thing is that you now can be able to see what the gift is, but now you have to be able to open it. But in order to be able to truly open any gift is that you have to be open-minded to be able to know that you can receive it in the first place.
So I would call that belief.
Not only belief, but it's belief that cannot be taken away from you because you have physical proof in front of you that you are the gift opening the gift in the first place.
All right. So the gift of authenticity.
Gift of authenticity.
Wonderful. Thank you for that imagery, Kevin.
Okay. Noah, what's the next one?
Number 6. Number 6, principle of Stoicism, is that we're dying anyway. Now, this is one that I would say is less high on my list of things I agree with as far as Stoicism. But that's based on my views on death, not really what they're saying here. So, the mindset of we are dying anyway. Life is an amazing journey full of amazing lessons and experiences. Living life as if we could die tomorrow in an intelligent way is, from a Stoic perspective, the smart way to live. Why waste time in fear? Why waste time worrying? What they were more focused on is how they can make a legacy, how they can make an impact that's positive, how they can help one another in the time that they have in their earthly vessels.
Mm-hmm. And, just like the British, just like, the Irish, just like all these different cultures throughout the world have always wanted to be able to make a substantial impact on the world. Not just a little micro, piece or portion of it, but the British made a huge impact, right?
Not all positive.
Not all positive. Who else made a huge impact on the world?
Alexander the Great.
Right, but I'm
The
talking
list goes
about
on and on.
Yeah, but I'm talking about who else as far as a colony, who else as far as people made substantial impacts on the world that we know today.
Well, oh man, I've got so many running through my head right now.
The British is what we fought most to be able to get our freedoms.
As far as America, yeah.
As far as America, right? And then who do we fight next to be able to keep our freedoms?
Well, the French came before then, then the British, and then we fought ourselves.
Right.
After fighting the British once again. So, ourselves?
Ourselves, right? Sometimes you have to be able to know how to handle the internal battles within yourself to be able to know who you are as a person.
Or as a country.
Or as a country, right?
Wow.
And so your battles from within are ancestral because everyone from your family line, your family tree, has gone through similar battles themselves, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Right.
And so what you need to be able to do on those 3 levels is to be able to resonate with, to be able to find familiarity, known as family. And then what's the third thing that puts it all together?
Well, you've got to know yourself.
In a new way, right?
That's right.
You've got to be able to embrace yourself in a new way, talk to yourself in a new way, do things in a new way, be a different person in a new way that benefits all of mankind.
That's right.
So listeners, if you're listening, that was 5 elements in that one sentence, right? The reason why it's so important is because when you know the principles, when you know the elements, then you can be able to then get really excited about science, technology, all these different other parameters and things that really help put the pieces of the puzzle together on a molecular structure for you to be able to then get bonded by your own blood in the skin to be able to then resonate to another human being the value that you have from within.
Yes, becoming that positive education, that positive learning. Not only learning, but applying and becoming.
So listeners, if that resonates with you, if that interests you, we have courses available that you can be able to sign up for. We have Zoom classes. We have all beautiful, gorgeous things coming available to you very soon for you to be able to have an intimate walk, not only in your word, but to be able to hear other people's words at the same time. The reason why these Zooms are so important, the reason why it's in our educational systems, is because we need to bring authenticity back. We need to be able to have a face-to-face encounter with someone else that is struggling just like you, that has issues just like you, that has problems just like you, and to be able to have teachers, trainers, motivators, directors, and guides that can be able to authenticate the information and to be able to present it in a new way that enhances your life in every way today. That's what we do at inanewway.com. And I encourage you to be able to go to that website and check it out for yourself.
Now, listeners, I know you're dying to hear the last aspect, the last principle of Stoicism, and I'm going to give it to you. But first, I want to let you know that we have a Patreon page where if you're resonating with what we're saying on this podcast, if you're resonating with any of the posts on the website, the videos on the website, then you can become a Patreon and actually support what we're doing by being a monthly donor. And now these monthly donors will get exclusive benefits that will give you more access to videos that we'll be doing exclusively for Patreon donors and all types of great benefits like that.
Right. Listeners, have you ever envisioned about having a guardian angel that gives you that wisdom, that gives you that nugget, gives you that, positive word that you need to be able to hear to be able to take yourself to the next level? inanewway.com is a vessel that you can be able to use to where you can be able to be enhanced by life enriching, soul satisfying, an emotionally rewarding situation on a daily basis.
That's right.
So if you want to be able to have those wisdom nuggets, if you want to be able to have that level of encouragement, you have to be able to then pick that environment for which you want to receive it.
Yes, that's the whole intention behind inanewway.com, is a positive, educational, and life-enhancing experience where every time you log in, you're leaving that website better than when you came.
And not only that, but your voice gets logged for all of history to be able to watch and view and appreciate.
That's right. Share your own wisdom as well.
Sharing is caring.
Now, number 7. Like I said, I'm going to give it to you. Number 7, Stoic principle, is in the vastness of reality, we are not that important.
And why is that?
Well, it sounds kind of pessimistic, doesn't it?
It could be.
It could be.
If you chose that pathway.
Now, the vastness of reality shows us that we are just a speck, less than a speck, in the all in all.
Mm-hmm.
And with that perspective, we can get kind of discouraged. We can feel like there's nothing worth doing if we're just this tiny speck. We don't leave anything that will actually make an impact. Well, Kevin and I don't believe that's authentically true.
Correct.
With an eternal perspective, we can see that everything that we do may have eternal implications. Everything that we do may have more of an impact than we can possibly imagine just on the other side of things, on the other side of reality, which is in eternity, right? So not being that important helps us to be humble. And I think that's the main point of what they were trying to get at in Stoicism.
Humility is one thing, but to be able to know thyself is another. Because when you naturally know how to flip your own switch to anything emotional, anything spiritual, anything personal, you then become the greatest guide to your own self-improvement that you could ever experience in all of your life. And if this is important to you, if this resonates with you, if this makes you want to yearn to be able to take your life to the next level, then I encourage you to remain humble, but seek first the kingdom, and the kingdom will become all yours.
Amen and hallelujah. That was wonderful, and I think that is how we can wrap it up. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Omnipresent Information Connection. We've got a lot of great things planned for the future, and we will meet you on the next episode of the OIC Podcast.
This has been another life-enhancing, authenticated podcast aired by the OIC and brought to you by the faithful OIC sponsors and contributors. Please tune in every week and subscribe to our podcast. And while you're there, explore our website with all the posts, videos, and podcasts that we have created with you in mind. While you're on the journey through our website, you will see our Patreon page where you can become a faithful contributor yourself with the freedom to be a part of our team today. Thank you.